Special meeting of April 23rd, 2024 to order at 6 p.m. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move into special staff reports. The first one is transition to detachment board under Community Safety and Policing Act, C-008-24. Mr. Graves.
So I'm going to turn all these reports directly over to our clerk, and I just want to thank her for the hard work on all these reports. I think they've streamlined what decisions need to be made by council, and I know it was a great deal of effort. As you will see, there's a couple details, or at least one detail we're still waiting on in the legislation, but we think we're going to assume which way we think it's going, and we think we can get council to consider some decisions to move forward. So I'll turn it over to the clerk with that.
Thank you. So this report was, of course, initially presented to council at the regular meeting on April 8th, and at that time, council moved to defer its consideration to the next council meeting, which is where we are today. Since that time, staff have drafted additional reports on matters related to the appointment of the board to help facilitate focused conversation on each item of importance, as we deem to be important, that remains outstanding. This report remains unchanged and is presented as information, and it serves as a high-level overview of the salient provisions of the Community Safety and Policing Act and relevant regulations under that act as they relate to the establishment of the Town of Ingersoll's OPP Detachment Board, which formally replaced the Ingersoll Police Services Board as of April 1st with the new act when it came into force. The other reports attached to tonight's agenda are intended to further supplement the content of this report. However, at this time, I'm happy to respond to questions about its content and the statutes that are referenced within it.
Thank you very much. Questions of the report? Councilor Hughes, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to the to the clerk. So there hasn't been any other release of legislation since the report that you did back on April the 8th?
There has not been, no.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions of the report? Seeing none, is there a mover and a second to receive the report as information? Deputy Mayor Wilson and Councillor Van Kooten-Bossens. Discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, and we'll move on to item number 2, please. And would you like me to go directly to the clerk? Sure. We will go directly to the clerk, please.
You're all going to be sick of me by the end of tonight. So as I just noted, Ingersoll's Police Services Board was formally dissolved when the Community Safety and Policing Act came into force on April 1st, replacing the Police Services Act. So under the new act, Ingersoll must move to an OPP detachment board. Like its former board is composed of 5 members. However, under the new act, the composition of the board has now changed. Regulation 135-24 was released at the end of March and provides that Ingersoll's board will be composed of 2 council member appointees, 1 provincial appointee, and 2 community representatives. At this time, council and community members still need to be appointed to the board, and staff have not received notice that the provincial appointee has been completed, although it is understood that that appointment is imminent. This report seeks council's direction on 3 matters, really. The first being the appointment of community representatives and the process through which those vacancies will be promoted. The second matter is the appointment of council members to the board, and then finally the timing of these appointments. And so those are all identified within the report. Staff have established a timeline in the report that we believe will ensure appointments are facilitated promptly, while ensuring that due diligence per Section 33 of the Act is being met. However, timing and direction on these matters is the decision of council as the appointing authority under the Act, and staff are happy to proceed with these items as directed. And with that, I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Questions of the report? Councillor Hughes, please.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Through you, Mayor, to the clerk. Other OPP detachment, Oxford OPP detachment boards, how are they being configured?
Through the mayor to you, I would have to, like in terms of their composition or just their appointments?
Let's go with both.
Okay. I would have to look at the regulation. I believe the rurals are all appointing one council member, and then they have one community representative that will be appointed to the board. I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not sure the details of Tilsonburg's, but I can quickly pull up the regulation if you give me a minute and find that out. In terms of appointment, I believe that the Tilsonburg board has been appointed. However, the rurals have not started a conversation on appointing their board, so I know that's a priority for them, but they haven't begun that process to date.
Okay. Just for clarification, you said there's one community appointee. Is that per township, or is that for the complete board?
I believe it's for the complete board. Let me just... So Blandford, Blenheim, Esor, Tavistock, Norwich, Swax, and Zora have one member appointed by each of the following municipalities who is a member of the council of the municipality for a total of 5 members. So each of the 5 participating municipalities will have one member of council, one member who is neither a member of the council nor employee, so that's their community representative. So they all have to come together and determine who is going to be their community. One member, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then one member appointed by the minister.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions of the report? Seeing none, before we have a resolution, I will get direction from some direction from council on how they will want to proceed. There is some questions at the bottom as far as what we do. So there is a resolution. I'll read the first part, which is just a receipt of information. That should be fairly straightforward. And that council approve staff to proceed with recruiting activities to fill in the community 2 board-based vacancies for community-based members on the timeline of this report and the attached posting. Is there consensus around the table to proceed in that direction? I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay. And then we have, and there's another question of, would council like to appoint community council members now or at the same time as the community board members? For timing wise. Councillor Van Kooten-Bosson.
So my question would be that if we were to appoint council members, when I read through the report, 3 is the number to go ahead and meet as a board. However, do we want to do that, or would we be farther ahead to wait and have our community members as well at the same time? Is there pros and cons? Maybe staff might be able to answer that one. Pros and cons of either way in that respect.
If I could comment on that, I think to me the biggest pro for waiting for your community members is that then you're establishing your chair and all of your board as one. This act seems to be heavily pointing to trying to involve community members in the police services board process. And so I think to follow the spirit of that act, I think it's worthwhile to make sure that you have your community members there and are all coming together as a fulsome board to make future decisions on what the board will look like.
Clerk, please.
Just to follow up, the timeline that's been provided in the report, if you were to delay appointing council members to when your community representatives are appointed, it's going to be about 2 to 3 weeks difference. So a slight delay, absolutely, which is a con. But then, as the CAO stated, you do appoint everybody at once so that you can move forward with board business with a full board complement in place.
Just to clarify that on the point of everybody have to have a police check. So council would advertise, they would then come back and say to the members, whether it be council or the community members, if it was all done at the same time, okay, we would like to appoint you to the board, go get your police check, and then once that clears, then if it clears, then they are appointed? Would that be?
Yeah, so in my report, to try to expedite this process, identified that council could consider conditionally appointing those community representatives. The Ontario Association of Police Services Boards have come out with an expedited police records check process. So it's free, and they will expedite these applications. So hopeful that we would see a quick turnaround time on that. But council could conditionally appoint these members to the board, just conditional on that clear record check.
Mr. Graves?
And it is possible, depending on the community members, that they may have had a record check within a period of time, so they may actually be applying and notifying you, hey, by the way, I've already had the clearance. So that's possible, depending on the individual.
Mr. Bowman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to clarify in my mind, so when we are looking at, I know what we're talking about council representation, but when we're talking about public representation, we're still going to advertise this and still give anybody who's applying the opportunity to get their background check before or after?
I would recommend after. So my thought process is we advertise for 2 weeks, bring those applications back to council at the May 13th meeting. So those can be considered. At that point in time, council can identify their preferred applicants, and then I can go back to those individuals and say, we want to conditionally appoint you to the board. Here's the process to get your police record check.
Thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Hallery, please.
All right. So I just want to say that I'd like to resign from the board because there is a lot of trading. And just to clarify from your report, there is a police record check that has already happened. It's been sent out to all members, assuming that we're not likening ourselves to the other detachment boards that are singling out one representative at a time. We are considered standalone, so most of us are all reconstituted. And there's a lot of trading that has already happened, and there's going to be further trading on May 1st. So I think at this point, if there's any training, I think Christy should take over because she'll be the one doing the rest of the term anyways. And there's no need for me to do all this training and not even be there. So I think it's time for her to actually step up, and maybe we'll need a second person to join. And then because I really do need time to remove myself from the activities that are already happening at the zone level. So I really would like for us to appoint those 2 members today so that I can officially take myself off activities that are still calling me out at the zone level.
Okay. Further feedback from Deputy Mayor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. From my understanding from the legislation too, it's really meant for the boards to pay close attention to having community members that are reflective of the diversity of the community. And on the diversity community, we found it challenging to kind of reach out to a broad base of people. So not to put that challenge on staff, but has there been any thought around how we could make sure we're at least getting that out to the community as best as possible so we can get diverse applicants back for those positions?
Clerk, please.
That is an excellent question. When we last went out at the beginning of the term to the community, we did a number of outreach engagement opportunities. We pursued a number of engagement opportunities. So posts in kind of locations where people might be, social media posts, and just really tried to rely on word of mouth. I'd like to think we were fairly successful in the number of people that we have appointed to our boards. So we would pursue something similar. I will also tap into the expertise of our communications officer, but also more than welcome to receive suggestions, either from the DEI committee or from members of council.
Excellent. So, I just want to make sure I get this procedurally.
if you want.
That's fine. Councilor Van Kouten-Bosens.
One more question. If we were to appoint our members, our council members tonight, would we have to meet as a board?
Mr. Graves.
I'd say no.
So in a sense, if I may, in a sense, we could appoint members then tonight, and those members could then start their process as well, and start the training. However, we wouldn't have to meet as a board, therefore still being able to include our community members, because I do think that it would be important to include our community members in picking chair and vice chair in that respect. So if that's something that I think that we could do, then to me, I think that makes most sense. But again, that's just my thoughts.
Councilor Halleran, please.
Yeah, so the board just met yesterday. It was supposed to be yesterday, and because we're reconstituted, so there was no meeting. And the next meeting will be a month from now. So the reason that the board needs to have, most of the boards, for example, met in April and were reconstituted so that their trainings will be done by 1st March and 31st May, which is like a deadline for everyone to be updated. So you have enough time when you get on the board to do all those training, get your police. They sent a special link for the police board members, so you would get your police check actually accelerated, if you put it that way, and then get it back so that you can actually be able to maybe attend May 1st training, and that way the board is back in business, because then there is time to be at a board meeting for May, end of May. So that would be the best thing to do.
Councilor Bowman and then Councilor Hughes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I tend to agree with Councilor Van Kouten-Bosens. If we were to, I guess, suggest or appoint our council representatives tonight, these representatives aren't on the board until bylaw, correct?
So you could technically rely on the confirmatory bylaw from this evening. However, the business of the board cannot proceed per the legislation until appointed members have completed the mandatory roles and responsibilities training. So that needs to be completed. The police records check needs to be submitted before any business can move forward with the board.
So if I might just continue with that, if we were to appoint our members tonight, then wait for the community members to come forward, then we could appoint everyone as a group at, in one shot, right, through a bylaw.
Correct.
I think that's what I would probably want to look at tonight, if it's possible.
So, could you just say that one more time so it's clear what you're proposing?
I would like to see if we could figure out who we would like to appoint from council on the board, and then they're potentially board members, and then once we figure out who we want to appoint from the community, we could take that whole group and appoint them under bylaw, all at the same time. Does that make sense?
Is there consensus around the table for that? Councilor Halleran.
I have a question. Is it possible to also propose a motion tonight before we round up?
In what respect?
I think I would highly, highly recommend that we have 2 council members on the board, and that your position as mayor should be flexible. If there's 2 members of council that want to be on the board, they should be allowed to be on the board, regardless of the mayor's position, because I do think it's important to have someone else who, when they come to council, has, the opportunity to collaborate with someone else on council, and then the mayor listen. Because I feel like the board in itself is something that we should be representative of council for, not necessarily in a position of driving an agenda. Like you said, we're not telling the board what to do, but we're reporting back to council on the activities that we assist in coordinating. I don't know, I just feel like we should take out when it comes to this board, the de facto status of the mayor, because it could be the mayor, it could be anyone. It could have been 2 people right from the beginning if the mayor wasn't there, and the mayor could have still known what was happening on the board. That's just a suggestion.
Mr. Graves.
So under the regulations that are currently there, it currently says 2 members appointed by the town of Ingersoll who are members of council of the municipality. It no longer says that the mayor is a de facto, so it actually says that it could be 2 members of council. It doesn't have to be the mayor. So that's already changed in legislation, and we can't make the mayor de facto under that. It would have to be whoever council appoints.
Thank
That's
you.
what the legislation says, so we have to follow that.
And I'll make it very easy. I have no interest in continuing to serve on the board. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask for a point of clarification on that, but also a point of clarification from Councillor Hatteru. You said that the board met a couple of days.
Yesterday.
So what board was that? Was that
No,
the Ingersoll
it-
Police or the
no, that was-
OAPSB board?
No, I'm saying that the schedule was meant to meet yesterday. There was no
Oh,
meeting.
right,
So
okay.
there won't be any meeting again for a month's time.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the boards that met yesterday have already finished training, which is what I was
Okay.
asking, that we should be reappointed and have the time to do training before the meeting to oversee April's
Mm-hmm. Okay.
reports.
So you're referring to
So
the
now there's
Ingersoll
2
Police?
months for the next
Right.
month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to point, wasn't sure if she meant if the board meant to be the
Yeah.
OAPSB or if the police service,
Our board-
the old PSB.
Yeah, the old PSB would have met, but
Right.
our board didn't change. So
Okay.
we're still a detachment board the way we were, unlike those that had to, the training that we did prior was
Certainly will respect Councillor Halleru's to your opinion, and that's what you believe the situation to be. The legislation does not speak differently to different boards, regardless of their status. As April 29, at the end of May, or sorry, at the beginning of May 1st, all boards under the old Police Services Act were disbanded, and now they have to be start brand new as a community detachment board. And that's what we're here to decide tonight about the appointments through that process. So by no means did I ever think that I was automatically reappointed to the board. As far as I was concerned, my term was done, and I'm no longer on the Police Services Board as of April 1st. So, Councillor Bowman, hand up before.
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor, and I think the CAO has answered my question. It was more to do with the fact that the suggestion was made that you were still going to be an ex officio member of the board, which this regulation states that only 2 members of council. The mayor is not an ex officio member. So that clarified my question.
Deputy Mayor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I just have one question of the clerk, and then I'm prepared to put a motion forward if it sounds like everyone's ready. So my question, I just want to clarify, even if we appoint council members tonight, but they're not confirmed by bylaw until next month, they could still do their police check and start on their training?
That's correct, yes.
Perfect,
Yep.
okay. So I'm prepared to start the motion. It sounds like we've had the conversation, if that's okay. Okay. So that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receives staff report C-009-24 as information, that the council approves staff to proceed with the recruitment activities to fill the 2 board vacancies for community members based on the timeline in this report and the attached posting. And further, that council direct the following members of council to be appointed to the board: Councillor Van Kooten Bossens and Councillor Hughes. And further, that these appointments be formalized simultaneously with the appointment of the council's community board members at a later date.
Thank you, Councillor Halleru. Discussion. Deputy Mayor Wilson, please.
I'll just say, I'm sure Councillor Hughes will want to chime in after me, but I think the board could use some stability in someone who's had some experience at the board before. So I could certainly support Councillor Hughes bringing that experience to the work that the board has ahead, and knowing Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens was kind of to start her term soonish anyway, it makes sense to kind of provide that consistency with those two council members.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you for the confidence.
No pressure.
No pressure, no pressure.
No, I'm fully supportive of this direction. Again, it states that the two council members, and certainly I agree with the Deputy Mayor's synopsis of why she chose those members, and I'm fully supportive of that. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So we'll now move on to item number 3, which is the OPP Detachment Board member remuneration, please. Clerk, please.
Thank you. So as part of establishing its new board, council needs to set compensation rates for those members. This report seeks council's direction on how board members are to be compensated and offers the most recent compensation strategy of the former board as adopted by council through bylaw 23-5250 that is attached to the report. This report also provides compensation rates for those same members prior to bylaw 23-5250. Staff attempted to include comparator information in this report, but unfortunately the legislation is so new that many municipalities may still be working on establishing their rates or have not publicly posted this information. Unfortunately, I didn't hear back from Tillsonburg yet on their rates, and the rurals are yet to begin establishing their board, so they haven't set those rates. Council should note that any direction on compensation for board members other than that given for the provincial appointee may be subject to change through further regulations. At this time, the regulation only speaks to the compensation of the provincial appointee and is silent on all other members. However, staff are unsure if further direction on this matter will be given by the province, but would assume that if given, it will align with what is established for provincial appointees, which basically says that council has the authority to set those rates. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions of the report? Seeing none. I do have a resolution here that first of all, that we received for information, and then it is asking for council to set the remuneration for the OPP Detachment Board for the chair, the vice chair, and the provincial and citizen and council appointed reps. I will speak to this to begin with. I believe that we should keep the same rates as we have now, pending seeing what the regulation, the act does say that there will be a regulation talking to the remuneration of the, and I would rather wait for that and then change it based off that and feedback from the new board on the work levels that the new board has. Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens.
I was going to say, I think we should leave it the same for right now as to what it is. I mean, we just set them back in 2023 and wait for that regulation to come out. I think that would be our smartest move to do in that respect. But again, my opinion.
Would you like to make the motion in that? No. Did you have your hand?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I guess feedback for that Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens as she works on the motion, but I would say if we're willing to revisit based on new like if anything else comes out or we get other information, I'd prefer the motion has direction around when we would reconsider. As of right now, well, assuming we go with what's recommended, it would be nice to have some direction if we're revisiting, you know, based on board recommendation within 1 year, or if new legislation or new direction comes out. But just clarifying when and how we'd be willing to revisit that would be helpful.
Just a point, a question is, it's my belief that the rates are tied to increases that are done every year for the staff increase levels. Is that correct?
I would have to confirm that with the treasurer, who unfortunately isn't here, but I can find that out.
Okay. Mr. Bowman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. again, just for me, for clarification, I understood you to say that if provincial regulations dictate a difference in the remuneration that we're looking at here, we have the ability to change that when and if it changes. So it is ours to change whenever we see fit.
Mr. Graves, please.
And this is why I can't express enough the frustration with the rollout from the province. The fact that we don't have this legislation, we don't know. So council could pass this resolution tonight, and they could even state when we're going to revisit it, and the province could come in and put the regulation in and say, these are the rates, everything else is moot. So you might not even get a chance to, we don't even know what that legislation is going to say. So that's the frustrating thing about this, is that we, all we can tell you as staff is kind of crystal ball it. I suspect that regulation change will either do that, which is change it and that's what it is, or it'll say you can set it to what you want. I think that is a trigger point. It would be our recommendation. My thought is as the board reestablishes itself and as we get some of the training done, that they could revisit that. I'm hopeful that this legislation will be out any day now. It would have been nice if it was out before now. But if should it come out any day now, the board sets itself up and meets, they complete the training, they'll have a better idea what their work is, and we could probably get feedback from that board if it needs to be drastically considered now, or if it's something could be considered in a year. So it's not a great answer, because the answer is I don't fully know, but that's why we're sort of putting this here and saying our best guess is this. I would say put your numbers in, and with a promise to revisit it, should it not be mandated by the province.
The original regulation, when it was posted, talked about remuneration, but then when it was officially adopted, that portion was taken out, and I'm not sure why. But at that time, it did say that there had to be agreement from the member municipalities of the detachment board, and if not, there was a process that I believe the Solicitor General would just say, here's what the rate was if there was an agreement. Obviously, with Ingersoll being a single municipality, it's easier to do that. But again, with that taking out, that's hard to say what it is. I think that my only worry is that when we publish for the members out there, it's like, this is the current rate, but it's subject to change through legislation, but the problem is it's always that way. Yeah. But I think it'd be fair and honest to say that this is our best guess and that we don't know 100% what that is going to be at this point.
Thank you. And I think the CAO's last sentence sort of summed up what I was going to say, was instead of giving it a hard deadline to reassess the compensation or remuneration, we just have to wait for the province to make their decision, and then we could tailor ours accordingly. But right now, this at least gives us some numbers to put in play.
Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens.
If everybody is okay with it. Okay. So moved by myself that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive staff report C-010-24 as information, and that Council set the remuneration of OPP detachment board members at the following rates: provincial, citizen, and council appointed members $75 per meeting, vice chair $93.75 per meeting, and chair $112.50 per meeting. And further, that remuneration be revisited after the legislation is brought forward through the Community Safety and Policing Act. And further, that a bylaw formally establishing detachment board remuneration under the authority of the Community Safety and Policing Act be brought forward for consideration at the next regular meeting of council.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bowman. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens.
So I was trying to take into consideration what the Deputy Mayor was saying about revisiting it when the CSPA comes back. But at the same time, we can bring it forward as a bylaw if we feel that at that point, we don't want it to be the bylaw, then we just don't pass that, we pull that bylaw. But at least we're moving forward. If we haven't gotten anything through the provincial government at that point, we go ahead and we set our bylaw. Bylaws change all the time, we all know that. So at that point, then we can figure that out. So that's why I did what I did.
Excellent. Councillor Hallery, please.
So just to clarify, again, during the training, the only boards that had their remuneration on the table to discuss were the ones that were disbanded and were coming together, and different boards had different remuneration. So the training said when they came together, they had to discuss and agree on what their rates were going to be and all of that. For those that were standing, they never had to expect a change in, there wasn't any way legislation was coming later for them. So I think we'll just continue doing what we're doing. I don't know if there is a confusion, but from the training that I attended, the confusion was for those boards that were disbanded and had to come together to discuss what their standard remuneration was going to be, because they all came from different remunerations from different municipalities. And then if you're standalone, you're just basically continuing on and based on what your municipality already did. So I just feel like I'm getting there's a confusion around waiting for legislation on it, and I don't think.
Well, I can speak to that because the legislation says that remuneration for OPP detachment boards will be through regulation. The regulation has not come out for either boards that are going to be true detachment boards or like Ingersoll and Tilsonburg that are continuing as detachment boards, but actually outside the detachment board. It's silent. So there is no direction on that at this point. Clerk, did you want to provide?
I was just going to say, I completely appreciate what you're saying with respect to those boards coming together and having to establish new rates. As the clerk, I love rules, and so under the new legislation, we legally have to reestablish those compensation rates because they were established for the former board, which is now dissolved.
The same way we're establishing the board members on that.
Correct, yeah.
Not that it's changing, but because we're just really formalizing.
Even if it's just a formality, it still has to be established because there's that new act in place, and so that's, I just want to provide my clarification on that.
Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. And we'll move on to our final report, number 4, OPP Detachment Board Terms of Reference. The clerk, please.
Thank you. So this report seeks council's direction on establishing a terms of reference for the OPP Detachment Board. While not required for appointment, staff do recommend that a basic terms of reference be adopted as a foundational document for the new board. The terms of reference attached to this report are based on a sample that was provided by the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards, which is largely based on requirements established under the Community Safety and Policing Act. Staff are recommending that the terms of reference be adopted with the understanding that amendments can be brought forward once the board is established and working through their mandate, and that further that schedules with board-specific policies and bylaws can always be appended to the document. That's my high-level summary of the report, but if there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Questions of the report? Deputy Mayor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff, probably the clerk. Does the board, once it's established, also have to adopt the new terms of reference, or is that solely at the direction of council?
So from the Q&A sessions that I attended as hosted by the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards, they stated that the terms of reference should be largely driven by the appointing authority, being the municipality. Ideally, the board, through a transition board, would have had input in creating this document. However, that did not happen, and so that's why when I drafted this, I used what the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards had provided as an example, went through and even where there was they've added some, scaled it back to really speak to the legislation so that it's not super subjective, it's just speaking to requirements of the board.
Any further questions? So there's a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive staff report C-011-24 as information, and that council adopt the terms of reference as attached to this report. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Bowman and Deputy Mayor Wilson, please. And discussion on that. Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm just going through the terms of reference again, looking at that, and yeah, it seems it's well encompassing to what is required of the board, and basically by omission determining what isn't required of the new detachment board. So it's a good document, but I'll definitely be reading it through again a few more times just to make sure. And yeah, it's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is what I'd like to see. Again, it does reference the legislation and basically the terms of what the role of is required by the legislation. I didn't see the legislation giving council the ability to change the role much more than that. It was just, you shall make a board that does these things. So I think that it includes the code of conduct, which is good, and the affirmation that has to take place. So I think that covers everything there. Deputy Mayor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Just one final comment to the CAO and to the clerk. Having done like several months of work in a very condensed period of time in a way that was very easy for us to all understand and kind of come to a consensus. So I'm feeling very grateful for how the reports were put together and the time that was put into helping us move forward on this issue. So thank you.
Very well said. Councillor Bowman.
I think I want to echo the sentiments of the deputy mayor. Again, this is pretty complicated in the lack of detail that we were working with. Again, thank you to staff for putting this together. You've done an awesome job at, she said, making it readable, making it understandable for us. So thank you very much for all your work.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we'll now move into consideration of bylaws. Councillor Van Kouten-Bosens, can I ask you to read the, to go into bylaws, please?
Moved by myself that the mover have leave to introduce and go into committee of the whole on the following bylaw. 1, April 23rd confirmation bylaw, bylaw 24-5307. Council and committee of the whole, Mayor Petrie and the chair on motion. The bylaw is accepted as circulated, and that constitutes the first and second reading of the bylaw.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Hughes. Discussion? None? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We're now at committee of the whole. Would anybody like to discuss the bylaw? Seeing none. Is there a mover and a seconder for the committee to rise out of committee of the whole? Councillor Bowman, Councillor Hughes. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. And third, that bylaw, actually, Deputy Mayor Wilson, I'll give you that one.
The bylaw 24-5307 be now read a third time, passed, signed, and sealed, and this constitutes the third reading of the bylaw.
Seconder, Councillor Bowman. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. Is there a mover to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Hughes, seconder, Councillor Bowman. Discussion? All those in favor?
Discussion.
Pardon me? Yes.
I just want to say I received an email from Danielle after last meeting. She felt like it was an attack on her work. And
So is this, it must be germane to the question to adjourn the meeting or not?
Yeah, I'm just saying I want to apologize to staff that felt like
Okay,
an
I'll allow
attack
that.
on. And that response to your email, I still haven't received a confirmation, so I just wanted to say I did send an email to make sure that you and Michael know that that was not an attack on your work. It was just, to me, an inconsistent information for that day because I had different information that wasn't heard. So we can adjourn.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.